for this particular session, the agenda is really to look at the new interface of PatientNotes. And you'll see on the screen there, we're really going to go into things like the My Persona, what we've done with templates and how we've really structured templates in our new, what we're calling, templates V2. We've also launched our new session and a whole lot of other new features. So the exciting thing is that as part of joining the session, many of you will be the first ever to access some of these features outside of our test environment. I also ask you that if you've got any particular profession-based template needs, I'd love you to just jot in the chat what profession you are and what type of template. The reason for that is that we will then do our best endeavors by next week to send you a recommended template that will then come up into your patient notes. And that hopefully helps you then to address some of the customization and get the ball rolling. Now, this is one of 3 particular workshops that we're going to run. And session 2, which is in 2 weeks' time, will go a lot deeper into a masterclass. It'll really go into template creation. It'll go into a whole lot of depth about how to optimize clinical interactions. That will be things such as how to import radiology and pathology and optimize that. How you can use things like if you're a physio and you're using things like Vald or PhysiTrack, how you can integrate the two and optimize the patient or the client journey by making different tools work for you in the session. We'll look at how to do intake forms into patient notes. And it's, as I said, it's really about leaving that next session with take-home templates for you to use. Session 3 is for the clinic owners. Those clinics that really want to go deeper, whether you want to automate things whereby things that are happening within the consult are then triggering off campaigns in things like clinic apps, for example, how you can use patient notes for supervising or mentoring, and we'll talk more about that. And also how you can use it for sort of streamlining and automated referrals. So that's just a little bit about what we're going to do. And I'm going to share in the link. I apologize for just this copy and paste here, but I am going to just share in the link those particular chats here. Now that might get linked up with regard to some of the people who are writing template help, but we'll also send out information. But it's really just to explain. We're going to go fairly randomly tonight. I feel like I'm a little bit like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, where we're sort of at the start of this tour and we're going to sort of share this with you. So let's jump straight in to what session V2 looks like. Patient Notes V2. So firstly, login is obviously exactly the same as what we're looking at. Many of you will have, sorry, I'll just change that screen. Many of you will have optimized and used the SSO. So in this case, if you are, utilizing your normal login. Now here, different screen that you might have seen recently, if you have different accounts, it'll automatically track you to your account. So if you're on the global server, if you're on the UK server, US server, for example, it'll tell you which accounts you have your patient notes on. Previously, we had to send people through different domains like UK or US or so on. Now, again, over the last couple of days, you might have seen a difference in how the dashboard looks. This is a dashboard with Clinico integrated. We obviously integrate with Clinico, Nucal, Halixy. We've got a Chrome extension with Pagozo, and Pagozo have just released an API, so we hope to do a deeper integration with those guys as well. So from this particular screen, the differences you'll see, and this is things that you'll be able to turn on tonight, is the appointments versus the tasks tab. And we'll talk about tasks as we get into the session. The look is fairly similar. Functions are pretty identical. Drop-down menu defaults to your preferred templates, and the manual notes has been replaced by Use My Notes. So if you're doing an in-person session, obviously the start session is still driving things as they would normally. The Use My Notes is if you've got an existing clinical note, then copy paste that in, and it might be one that you might have done 2 years ago about somebody and you have to write a medico-legal report. Just then you can use My Notes and then trigger off letters, patient summaries, or reports as per normal. Now, from there, the First thing you want to do is now jump into the profile screen. Profiles had not only a sort of a bit of a facelift, there's a function lift as well. So different fields you'll see straight away through here will be that there's provider number. This is essential for the pending PDF generation reports, and I'll give you a look at what that does. But obviously, the more information we have in here, it can populate this information. Many clinicians don't actually use this language and dialect, and it's not a bad little thing, even though you're recording in English or UK or whatever. It's really nice to add an extra little nuance here that you are wanting Australian or UK or Canadian sort of language, because it then helps with the spelling and the punctuation. When I go into most people's settings, this is still left blank. We've added in a sublocations page. So let's say you've got an organization and you've got multiple clinics, then you can use this different location. And what that enables then again, the generation of letters and or the generation of PDFs. Now, I know the question many of you will be thinking is, what about if a practitioner works across multiple locations? That will come, but first release was this particular function. Again, we encourage the signature, and there you might put your qualifications in. And then one thing that's really good, because the new reports and templates allow signature to go in. So if you've got a JPEG or a PNG with regard to a signature, absolutely upload those. So these are the little things that might only take a minute or two, but many practitioners haven't actually gone and set that up. Under preferences, again, probably many of you already had a look, but it's just worthwhile hashing through a couple of things that are a little bit different, just to make sure if you've got any frustration whereby you haven't or your microphone has gone on to a mute, and I know that Windows sometimes, if people are using a PC to log in for different users, sometimes a microphone doesn't get carried across with that user login, and there's nothing worse than starting a session and not having that audio. So you've got, oh sorry, no audio alert. That's the bottom one down here. So it pings you to let you know if nothing's coming through. Audio playback, that's fine. We've got a new consent form. For those that are joining from New Zealand, there's a new legislation that encourages people in a clinical session to actually have the patient or client interact before they do the AI. So there's both explicit and extended consult that gives a more on-screen workflow visual for people that are actually in front of you, client-facing. These are all fairly straightforward. Again, one thing that many people don't utilize is the medication assistant that goes across the top 300 PBX medications, so that it then validates the name as well. So if you ever find any frustration with regard to medications, turn that on. Down the bottom, there's an option to hide or show class participants. Some people want to show it, some actually don't. So they're just the options there. Now, before we get any deeper, the next tab is the area that you want to play around with. What I'd encourage all of you to do tonight is to make sure that some of these are turned on, especially if they're applicable. The task manager will show that tab, and we'll talk about task manager or to-do list as we go. We now have a deeper integration with Clinico and Nucal that loads the previous sessions and adds that context into the individual consult, but you can also build multi-session reports over the past 10 consults. So make sure that if you're doing that, and obviously it would show Nucal previous consults, and we'll look at other integrations there. I would also encourage you to have the PDF upload and what's called the session upgrade, which is really what we're talking about tonight. Before we get into the fun stuff, clinic setup. Many of you might have seen over the past 24 hours, a little thing that's called tags come up. And tags is breaking your organization down into different subcategories. It might be locations, it might be professions, it might be different teams, or you can just create different special interests. So it might be, in this case, it's looking at a musculoskeletal clinic, but you might then have a women's health category, a vestibular category. And the benefit of that is that as an organization, you can then have a library that ensures that we only have the templates organized for those particular interests and they don't end up with a template list of 50 or 60 if you've got some of those special ones. It might be the practitioner just wants one and there's a group of shoulder physios, there's a group of psychologists that do EMDR and some that don't, then you can really just optimize that. So tags is a super useful sort of functionality. With that, you go in and you actually assign these managed tags through here. So you've then got the option to turn on based on what you've set up from there. With the integrations, the only other thing that's, again, some practitioners might have lost if they did their integration for a little while. Obviously, there's the option here to hide cancelled appointments, but it also gives you that visual of who's synced and who hasn't synced on that particular API. So hopefully that's very, very useful. Now we're going to get into some of the fun stuff. I guess really addressing the things that at PatientNotes, what we've done is really listen to what's gone on over the last 3 years with regard to scribes. And we know that in terms of the AI and the proof of concept, yes, we know that we can transcribe, we can do notes, we can do all this, but it's often the templates and the personalization where we know that it didn't necessarily tick everybody's boxes. So what we've now done is added the ability to have, as a practitioner, a persona, but also to add a whole lot of document and template rules. So here you'll see a thing set up, but as soon as you run the My Template, you're going to end up with something like this. And it says, let's get into the wizard. Now, you've got three options when you start this. You can either go into really, really specific. You can sort of just go through a magic, which might ask you 3 or 4 questions and then get you going, or let's just get going and let's just do our notes. And you probably have practitioners in your clinic that you already know are the meticulous, the fastidious ones that want the specific type. And there's others that just aren't doing their notes at all and they just don't really care. They just need something down in terms of the language. So, but setting that is really, really useful. Now, if you set up the specific, it'll work you through different questions. So how much detail would you like your notes? How would you like information to be ordered? Do you want it via systems, severity, or do you want to actually sort of custom order things? Now here it's done sort of obviously the cranial nerves, but you can set any particular order in terms of what you would like. In this case, let's do importance. We can talk about how we want the patient or the client to be referred to, and we can talk about names and pronouns, or really, I guess it's pronoun safety that we're actually looking at here. What is the tone of the letters that you want? As generally do you interact with your referrers and your network? Are you a very sort of clinical sort of, or are you quite a relaxed, warm sort of style? So, and we'll work through all of these different ones. And then once you've done the wizard, you end up with this option that says, this is what we think that sort of is matched to your persona. Now, you've always got the chance to either rerun that wizard or you can go and change any of these particular subsections. And the wizard doesn't necessarily settle the standard things like date, time, and so on. But you'll see some more options if you go in deeper. But again, it's the kind of thing that if you have a cancellation, you've got 3 minutes, then just go in and set this up. Now, what happens is that we've got a hierarchy. So obviously with regard to organizational templates, there are some settings that if the My persona is still not set, it governs over what the organization has actually set as the rules. And this will make more sense when we get into the individual templates. But again, I would encourage people to do that My persona so that we can end up with that sort of language and style. Now, many of you will have seen the templates, and the templates has taken on a couple of different versions over our now over 3-year journey. And some of you will have a setup like what I've got here. You'll see that there's a term under the Pilates class, for example, called legacy prompt. You'll see a V1 template and you'll see a V2 template. Now, we support all different templates. So if you've got one that's working, great, that's fine. You don't have to necessarily update it. But if you're finding that there's aspects to your templates that you want to sort of optimize, then you can absolutely get into the V2 templates, which gives you a whole lot more customization. Now, all of these are drag and drop, so you can reorder them, and that will change the order when you do your select templates at any part of the use of patient notes. So it'll choose the top ones accordingly. So if I wanted to move basic soap note up, for example, I just drag and I drop it like that. Um, Now, here we've got the ability to do the exact same thing now under letters, reports, and patient summary. So the first question, clinical notes, that's pretty straightforward. That's doing our notes, our case notes, our clinical notes, whatever we want to call them. So once we've done our audio session, that's being transcribed against the clinical note. Our letters, again, what are we doing? We're creating often one-off communication with somebody where the patients come in, they've had a referral, we're sending the thank you for referring letter back to the doctor, we're sending a referral letter off to the surgeon, whatever it may well be after we've done the clinical notes. Reports are designed for multiple sessions. So it's been created that somebody's come in and you might have seen them two, you might have seen them 15 times. And you want to have that report style that talks to the chronological change that's happened, in terms of whether it be subjective, objective, outcomes, whatever it is, it's going to then track that across time. And patient summaries, our patient summary or our action plan. So it's quite often just important to delineate between letters and or reports, because sometimes people don't necessarily use it for the right one in the right context. So when we're coming into templates, any of what we call the version 1 templates, you can obviously upgrade that to the V2 templates. What does V2 templates basically do? It gives us the ability to do a lot more control over the structure. So when we're in here, we've now got our conditional logic, like you can see here in terms of adherence. We've got the ability to drag and drop. So rather than having to nerd out on being a medical prompt engineer to get something, or in many cases, where we find is a lot of people will throw something into ChatGPT or Claude and try and get a prompt and then put it in. But the problem is that it doesn't necessarily contextualize the clinical aspects of a scribe, so that it can sometimes fall down. So now we've built a chat agent into here. So if you wanted something added in, then just engage with that. It might be that you wanted to add in a particular section, and it will absolutely do that. You might want more detail, less detail. You might even give it instructions that control the formatting. Now, you can control the formatting manually. So I can choose different sections here. So I can have whether it's going to be in a sentence, paragraph. We can now use direct quotes. So that's really fantastic when somebody's talking about, you want to use their own words, like the back pain's killing me, or there's some potential suicidal ideations, things that you really need to capture in their exact wording. Then you want to use those sort of direct quoting. Again, really powerful for things like medico-legal reporting. When we're looking at lists, we've got the option to do lists via bullets, numbered, or inline. Inlines for more sort of exporting to Excel sheets like CSV kind of thing. We can now add what we call labeled, and labeled is a really, really useful and underutilized section, and I'll sort of go into that in a second. But what it does, it basically says, again, I'll come back to the musculoskeletal side of things. Let's say we're looking at shoulder, it might have shoulder flexion, and we can have 120 degrees. So we can label it with what the test or the finding, or it might be medication, past medications, and it talks about, OxyContin, 120 mils. So we can have the value output. We can write a sentence like the patient has 120 degrees of shoulder flexion. We can write a paragraph, on examination, the patient today had 120, so it goes more sort of verbal, and goes on. Or, sorry, did I mention the value? It'll just have the exact amount. We can also have tables now. Now, tables make things look really, really great. They look fantastic, especially in letters and reports. The only downside of tables is that we're bound by what the practice management softwares will take in. So if you're using Clinico or Nucal or Halixy, sometimes the API won't necessarily allow a table to go in for a clinical note. We can now push the letters and or reports into the documents folder of those EMR systems, which preserves the tables. But sometimes people will come to us and say, "Oh, it looks so much prettier in your system than it does back into Nucal or into Clinico." And we're going, well, that's unfortunately out of our control. That's what they do. So engage into here and give it instructions. So let's just say include a smart goals section and make it a table. And it will just spend its 15, 20 seconds little spinning and thinking. And the other benefit of it, it'll come back with some recommendations. Say, have you thought of this? Would you like me to have a look at the rest of the template and sort of say, look at other sections. So sorry, I'll just scroll down. Hopefully I don't make people dizzy. So it's added this in and it's done that. And that's probably saved me 3 or 4 minutes compared to setting up manually. You can obviously edit anything, and the more you engage with it, the better it's going to be. Now, for the people that are really, really confident, then you'll sort of be able to sort of either engage with the tool to say only generate smart goals if it's discussed, or you might then take away the conditional logic and make sure that it's always so. There's sort of these if and then plans. So that means that if you've got a really well set up template, you can ensure that it deals with different clinical situations rather than having to have like a million different templates within your practice management system, how you would normally. So the craft with AI is a really, really great tool. Now, similarly, you've got the option here to do, pardon me, custom fields. So custom fields is, we can drag and drop things in, particular merge fields, or we can actually add in headers, spaces. A lot of people say, oh, I want a little bit more space in between. Tell the chat agent to do it, or just do it manually. Pardon me, just having a sip. You can add in different heading sizes. So it could be larger headings such as H2 or H3 or some of this logic on the left-hand side. You can do that manually, or if you're actually in here, then if you wanted to reduce that, look at the toolbar up the top and say, okay, I want to have that in the middle and I want to have a smaller size. And it will just do that. You've got bold, you've got italics, you've got all these kind of things. So there's a lot more formatting control than you previously had. The other benefit of where we've gone is that we've added individual context section rules. So you've got the formatting, like I showed before. We can now have different rules. So this ties back into your persona, but it also gives you a lot more control of individual sections rather than just being, I always love it to be verbose and detailed. I might actually just want my action plan to be short and punchy. So we can look at things anywhere from, so it's talking about the different formatting types there, but I might look at my different, I might want to control how I want my punctuation. If I'm doing exercise display, I might want to either have that in, shorthand, longhand, and so on. And again, this is not just sort of physio specific. We can compare sides. We can look at the amount of detail. We can talk brief, standard, comprehensive, and extended. How do we want to handle things when they're not relevant? So not only can we have here to say omit, but also on the previous section where, I'm sorry, I'm going to just jump here, make conditional. We'll go to, so if it's discussed, otherwise show nothing or use the default placeholder. So if you're showing nothing, that's just that section's not going to be created. There's some advanced functionalities. Now, again, remember, this is just per individual sections. So if you wanted to go through and sort of filter each one, then absolutely make those or use the craft with AI. There are some overall government document rules as well. And they're things like, how do we want people to be referred? Coming back to those pronouns, remember this can sort of override the my persona. How do we want the language and style? Do we want it warm and fuzzy? What different tense do we want? Now, you don't have to go through and set these up. This is just really to try and cater for the people that just have found either previous prompts frustrating, or they just haven't got it to do exactly how they want. Now, not only can you edit existing ones, we have been actively updating our library. So when you go into the library, you'll see different recommendations for you and profession, and that's where I've asked you all to put in your chat. If you'd like a couple of different templates popped in there, then just drop in your profession and what you'd like it for, and we can add that into the recommended section. Now, if I was to create an existing, wanted to create a new template, then what I could do here is I'm going to now create a initial intake form for a psychologist. I can, like V1 templates, I can still import, or I can use an example, or I can just start from scratch. And what I've just had pulled from the other side is just an example of one. I can just paste that straight into Craft, and it's now going to do that and then generate that from me. So that might be an existing template you have in your practice management software, or it could just be a gold standard clinical note and or a letter or a report that you're already using that we upload. And that's just going to save you a bundle of time. Now, this is, I guess, a little bit of a thing that I personally have found is that I've found if you've got a template that you're converting, I find that the Craft works better. So we just work through and do this, and that's sort of done that. If I was giving an example, so I had that gold standard clinical note, I would actually use the import an example. So Craft is better for prompt to prompt. Import is better for example to prompt. And then what you've then got the option, and again, where we sort of really encourage you to go is once you've made some changes, then go in and run a test and just optimize it to how you would exactly like it. While we're just chatting, we're going to go into a bundle more detail in session 2 about this. But the thing that I find is when people have come unstuck with outputs not generating what they want, often the instruction is too complex. And some of you might have heard me say this, but when there's the context around a section, it's like my wife giving me a shopping list to Bunnings and telling me verbally just to get all 20 different things. And then I get home and I've forgotten 3 or 4 of them because I've got confused. I've gone down the wrong aisle. I've tried to please too much. I found a particular gift and I wanted to do all these things. And AI tries to please a lot. So the more direct and succinct. So even with this adherence section, I would actually just try and make it 1 to 2 lines, sentences at most. When we see that there's lots of different instructions, that's where things can sometimes be missed. And don't forget, you can have as many different sections like under that. So I can have multiple sections under adherence. There's no problems with that. So if you're doing something like an objective examination, there's no problems with having active range of motion, special tests, grip strength, whatever it may well be, as particular subsections through there. So that would be my one bit of advice prior to our masterclass that we're doing in 2 weeks' time. Perfect. Now we're going to just jump into the session V2. So session V2, the new session interface has changed quite a lot. Now, some of these features will exist on the professional plan. Others I'll be talking about that might not sort of show, but we've broken it into context and interaction. This is a completed one, but think of the context of going, okay, what has happened leading into this consult that can give me more information? It could be an intake form. It could be radiology, pathology, referrals, whatever it is. Now, if it's a PDF, I can absolutely drag and drop those straight into here. If it's something that's more text-based, just dump it into additional notes. Like just put the more information in here, the better. And you can have multiple files. So you might have a referral, you might have an MRI, you might even have an export from a valid assessment and put it into there. You'll see down on the right-hand side now, it loads the previous session from Clinico or Nucal. Now, this might be one that I've done and a date and timestamps, and that's fine. So cool. All right, this is the cervical spine, same condition, same case. I'll include it. But it might be that 2 weeks ago I saw the person for a different condition. Then you, I wouldn't include it for include it for context. So now it gives you those options to add PDF, additional notes, and preload the last session. When the interaction's happening, some of you might have seen this, and this is something we're sort of really, really proud about. This is happening dynamically. So there are some different settings, and what you'll typically see is it'll start to populate every couple of minutes, and then it might sit and you can manually refresh it. So you will see the intervals that it's preloading, but it's like you're just jotting down notes during the clinical session. And this is all populating real time for me. So it's saying MSK, cervical spine, possible C5-6 radiculopathy. It's talking about all these findings. It's putting all the examination in the list. It's giving me some of these little snippets. It'll come up with the dog's name, the wife's name, the previous treatment. So I don't have to worry about having to wait for the audio to transcribe before I can remember what their objective tests were or what they were telling me about their issues at school. It's all here. And this is irrespective of whether you're a GP, surgeon, musc physio, psychologist, counselor. This will populate based on your profession. And then it gives you all these little nerdy things, and it's awesome because it's populating. And even better, it populates these plans. Now, the plan will tie back obviously into your clinical notes, but it highlights automatically what our goals are for that and suggested goals. And it also gives you some ideas about actions. Now, some of these will be quite general, some of them might be quite specific. So, in this case, and I'll jump into here while we're talking about it, you can now add that task based off here. So it's said, cool, let's create the task. And it then does that. What do we need to do? And it might just be that we're writing a letter, and then you can edit that and create tasks. So you don't need to be bouncing out. You don't need to worry about, am I going to write that referral? Do I need to do the scan? So if I mentioned in this situation that we're going to get an MRI, it'll say organize MRI, and then I can add it back to tasks. Then the clinical notes are done. At any time, slightly different interface, you can do the exact same thing. You can drop and change templates. So we can go, you know what, it wasn't initial, I wanted to follow up, and that's fine. If during the session you wanted to see the individual template that you're working off, just click the little I button. And this is really good for junior practitioners that want to make sure they check through all things. But I'd also say that between here and in here, if you're starting to see some of these key red flags and things popping up, then that's a real indicator that they should be filtering this before ending the consult, just to make sure that things are being ticked off. Notes are done. Now, the difference in V2 is that you've got a much better refine and feedback option. The last one was good, but it was a bit clunky. Now, not only can you click some of these shortcut keys and add the instruction, but you can actually even just, you know what, I love the rest of it, I just don't like the range of motion section. And you can highlight that and then give it an instruction to redraft it. So that's really nice. Same thing down the bottom, you've got the option to send to practice management software if it's done. You can download as PDF, email, or just have it onto the clipboard for those that aren't integrated. Then a patient summary is generated. Now, patient summary has the option to have all of those things that I mentioned before: tables, logos, signatures, and you've got the refine option through here. With Clinico and Nucal, we've gone deeper with that. So not only can you copy it, but you can send it back into the documents folder. So as PDF, that way it's in the repository and you can email it straight from there, which is really, really nice. The letter interface it's a lot tidier. And same thing with the letters. You'll see now it lists just the top 4 or 5. How do you organize the top 4 or 5? Just drag and drop them as you need to. You can see what the template's going to be. And then if you want to, create your particular letter. Now, I was just fiddling with something in my Clinico before, but what you'll find is that the Clinico contacts or Nucal contacts will also load up. The only caveat on Nucal is that we do need to help you go to the API 3, which some of you might have sort of had to do with other integrations. And that helps to load up your medical contacts sort of through here. I'd encourage people to really better the way they use this customize. Think of this little square being like how you'd integrate with Claude or OpenAI. So I've got the session, I've got the note. Now generate a letter back to Dr. Smith about a right shoulder hydrodilatation. Just give it a little bit more context. Now the letter also enables you to refine it, whereas beforehand it didn't. But the more context you give it, the better it's going to be. And here you can also include other things. MRI, radiology, pathology results, whatever you can put into there, you're going to get a better outcome out of it. So the big difference here is absolutely the interactions. You'll see that'll pop up. If you want it refreshed, there'll be a little refresh button on the right-hand side. You'll also see during the consult, at any point in time, I can do the tasks from up here. So we're talking about that MRI. I can just create that task. And I can tag it as urgent. I can choose my date, and that's all good. So done. Uh, so there's three places you can organize your tasks, and the tasks then will show up through here. It'll show what's urgent. Really nice little feature that the guys built is, let's say this one here about the scan. I might accidentally delete it, but if I made that mistake, oh no, I didn't mean to do that one. I meant to do the one below. You can reset it within I think maybe 30-second period of time. Obviously, you can start those tasks from those screens that I gave before. You can start the tasks from blank here. It doesn't link in with the session. You have to create sort of that session. Or I can start it from sessions. So let's say I've gone back into here. This is my session. I can add to task list. So there's a couple of different places you'll see tasks pop up. It's really designed to be pretty frictionless. So you don't have to be worrying about sort of bouncing around too much. Now, letters, I showed before, the letter interface has changed just a little bit there. So that looks quite different. The biggest thing, whilst it might look a bit prettier, it's that refine and that context and that engagement that you can do that you couldn't do beforehand. Finally, we're sort of getting a little bit towards the extent of what I wanted to cover today. Today was just a sort of a 10,000 foot view just of what we've done different and why we've done it. And we've done it really to listen to you guys. Now, so we've talked about the session V2, the templates. We've talked about the change of interactions. One of the features that we've got coming out in the next week or so is also the pre-population of PDF templates. So the frustration from an admin point of view is that a person comes in and you get bundled with load. You got to write that action plan for the patient. You should write an action plan or a patient summary. You should write the comms back to the medical team and do all of those kind of things. And then you're burdened by the other things that good old WorkSafe do, or it could be that you've got to populate it on your own clinical forms. So what we've done here, let's just create, let's go John Brown. Now, this is creating a PDF, and I'll talk about why we put it in this particular report section. So John Brown came in for a session. I can then choose what type of PDF. Now, when we're launching these are the ones that we're just starting off with. There's probably going to be, a whole lot of NDIS and different state-based ones. So they will be preset to start off with. Down the track, and also if you've got your own particular report templates PDF, by all means email us and we can sort of tell you what might be involved in getting those set up so that you can generate them on your own form. And then what it does, and I prefacing this by saying that this is just in the final stage of testing. It takes that, in this case, a WorkSafe form, and will take the session and then pre-populate what it can from your session. Now, the important thing is it doesn't know what it doesn't know. So if I haven't explicitly said some things, it's going to say it actually hasn't filled in these particular forms. And this likely to look a little bit cuter by next week. But it opens up the PDF and says, all right, here, this is what we've done. We've actually said from our session, these are all pre-populated, assessments done, these are sessions, and then there's a couple of sections that we just need to fill out. So we're not saying that it necessarily will be 100% completed, But what we're hoping that you can go, you know what, by having 70, 80, 90, 95% of the form filled out, it's push between it taking you 30, 60 seconds to have done versus the, oh man, I've got to put aside 10, 15, 20 minutes to do. And we can do this with lots of different forms. So we've gone down and generated things like the NDIS forms and so on. So we're really excited by this. We have just got a group out in to test at the moment, but just letting you know that this is on the horizon in the next week or so. So that's where we're at. We've got some other pretty cool features, but tonight's not the night to share those with you. We will talk about those in our next session. The reason is because we've sort of been one of the first four and players out there, and we know that a lot of organizations sort of want to match us. So we're going to release to you guys these features early. We respect that, but we don't necessarily want to sort of throw it out before it's available to you. So quick rehash over a couple of the key things. Different interface, task manager. If you don't see these features such as the look that I've shown you, you do absolutely need to go into the early access features and toggle those on. You'll see a lot more emails coming out from us. We're not going to apologize a bit. We've been in the trenches for the last, really 6 to 9 months to get this sorted. But you will see our communication just going up another level about a whole lot of new features that'll be coming out. Just if something pricks your ears up, go to this early access, toggle it on, and have a play. There's no harm in that. You can always toggle it off at any time. So we talked about the My Persona going through there. We do have an analytics page. So if you're on the clinic plan and you're interested in knowing a little bit more about your users, about what templates are being done, we do have a reporting function here, and we will sort of option that if you're interested in that. The library, if you go into here, you'll see some recommended prompts, and this is where I'm asking you to put in the chat about some templates you would like. This is a new feature versus the all templates. When you're in there, choose your different profession, and you'll see that some will come up just for you, some will come up for your profession, and work through there. So finally, I just wanted to re-talk about the sessions that we are running again. So the next session we're going to do is a deeper dive into absolute optimization for your clinical templates and your clinical sessions. And that's sort of getting into things like I mentioned earlier, how to use different intake forms, valves, so on. Session 3 is going to be about the automated, how can we have it that if somebody during a session talks about ACL, they talk about poor coping strategies or an addiction during a session, how can we then trigger off different email campaigns using other systems like clinic apps, and how can we sort of really sort of get that data farming? We do know that the source of truth in clinical sessions is in the conversations that are happening. But the thing that's come to light in the last couple of years is that hasn't been documented well by the majority of practitioners. So now what we're really working with different groups now is to say, let's get better clinical notes and or reporting. Let's make sure that we reduce these risks and the red flags in terms of being able to provide this information back to the clinician. But the future is also how can we provide that back to clinic owners to ensure that we know the practitioners, the clinicians who are doing their job amazing, and those that could be doing some extra assistance. So that's where session 3 comes in. And in that, we'll talk about a mentoring and supervisory aspect that we've got access to and that we're testing. So we're looking at sort of the deeper analytics, both of a clinical session, but also across. So finally, I'd sort of like to just mention that if there are individual support questions you have, obviously jump straight into the help section within our system and flag those, and hopefully we can help you between now and the next session. I'll post those webinar links one more time, or hopefully they'll still be sitting there. No, we'll email them out. We'll email those other webinar links out over the next week, and we'd love to see more of you in the next couple of sessions. So our goal really is by the end of session 3, you've got a really good grasp of how to optimize it, not only for note taking, but the add-on features. And we liken that to you buy the new iPhone, you buy the new car, and it's got lots of features. And sometimes you just don't necessarily read the manual. We want to take you on this deeper dive so that you find the help with patient notes really drives your clinical and your business. So again, thank you for your time. We look forward to seeing you all in the coming weeks.